Hey you guys, this is Josh
and Carolyn
with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat, Food for Thought.
Yeah.
And today we are going to cover your questions over several of the last videos.
Yeah, it's been quite a few weeks since we've done a Q&A session.
It has been. We're due for a Q&A. We've got some good questions up.
Right.
But before we get to that, how's it going? How are you guys doing? And what are you doing? Right. Yeah.
Oh, you know, the major rush of fall preserving in the kitchen is now winding down. So we're
for us.
I know
some of you, I think, are thick in it.
Yeah, I think a lot of you guys are behind us, and the rest of the country, you have a longer harvest season.
And we got pushed ahead early because of those hard freezes.
Yeah, we had the storms just really put us into a scramble. So that is starting to slow down. So we're switching gears in the household and moving towards longer homeschooling days, more like solid homeschooling days. So that has been a real focus for us in the house this week, is really kind of dialing that in, getting people into full focus on homeschooling. So
kind of switching gears, but you're still kind of in winter prep mode. There's still some things to do here. There's still some preserving to do. We've got to get some of our long-term stores in for the winter, right?
Yes.
Some of our grains.
Yeah.
I know is one big one.
That's a big one that's coming up here for us. We also have from all the meat that's come in, I've got a lot of rendering to do.
Yeah, you do.
A lot of lard, a lot of tallow soon. I actually have a deadline on that one because
the
freezer
coming in.
is too full.
Yep.
And so I gotta clear some of the stuff out that can be cleared out easily.
We have a whole beef getting ready to come in.
Yeah, and I haven't even gotten to canning much meat, and we like to have quite a bit of meat canned and on the shelf.
Oh, both for ease of use, quick meals, and just for some backup storage.
It's also nice for backup when Mama forgets to take something out of the freezer for dinner, and it's not
out
defrosted.
For an event for the day. You bet.
It'd be really nice to have
quick
your convenience food on the shelf. Hey, speaking of that, I'm gonna drop a little bug in your ear hint.
What's going on?
Yeah, what's going on is we're getting ready to release this free training
workshop
for convenience foods on your shelf. It's a workshop, a 4-video training. Yep. That's going to be coming out here in the next few weeks. So just keep your eye open for that.
Very
exciting.
Cool. Yeah,
I'm excited about that.
Right.
So get you guys some convenience food on your shelf for those busy days.
Right. Love it.
So what have you been up to?
Well, winter prep. We're trying to finish up rehabbing the barn so we've got the cow in there. We've got to get some sheep in for the winter. We thought we were going to repair our barn roof. And this happens, you guys. One thing that you can, as we're talking a lot about preparing right now, one thing that you can always prepare for is the unknown, the thing you're not prepared for. We bought this place. We knew we had a leaky barn roof. We planned to fix it. Got up there to fix it and found it was rusted through all over the place. So we're having to replace it.
It was bad.
Before we get hay in. So we're getting that done, and a lot going on in Mom and Dad's house, trying to get it's under construction, as a lot of you guys know. It's coming together nicely, but it's a bit of a race to get it dried in before winter, before weather comes, and some heat on in it so that we can do the finishes.
Right. And next week's Pantry Chat, we're actually going to be talking a lot more about winter prep for the homestead. So we're going to be talking a lot about this, what we're doing, and giving you guys some food for thought on what you can be doing.
It's a lot of winter prep. One of those is getting that stove up and going, the wood cook stove. We're going to talk about that. We've got a couple questions about it, and we got it all installed and found some of the fire brick was in bad shape and the fire box a little more. Right. And so I'm having to do a little more of a rehab on the fire box to get that working. Yeah. And I hope to get that up this weekend. We'll see.
I'm excited to get that fired up. That'll be really good.
Yeah. So that's about it.
That's all.
And since the full episode is on questions, we don't have to do the short Q&A. So I think, are you ready?
Yes, let's jump right in.
Yeah, we can dive right into it.
Because we have quite a few videos to cover that we haven't gotten to. So.
Okay, so right off the bat, talking about Cookstoves.
Now, we're answering questions on that kitchen tour we did. If you haven't seen the new kitchen tour.
The Harvest Kitchen Tour.
The Harvest Kitchen Tour. This was right before that storm hit us. Right. And we were scrambling to get everything
stuff everywhere.
So there was stuff everywhere. It was kind of fun though.
Try to link to that at the end.
Okay.
So Catherine Newsom asks, I love the wood cook stove. Can you please tell me what brand it is?
Ah, that's a Waterford Stanley.
Waterford Stanley, which were discontinued, I found out after we bought this one, along with all the parts, in 2018.
Yes.
But they are fantastic stoves. We researched them a bit, and they weigh a ton, I think, nearly literally. They are
very solid.
Very solid, mostly cast iron. There's some sheet metal on the outside, but it's a cast iron stove, so it holds its heat real well. It's supposed to cook real well, so I know you're excited about that.
I'm excited about that. Many of you guys remember back when we were in California doing some videos. That summer we were back there, and we were at my parents' on their Aga stove. And a lot of you guys had comments about that Aga stove. This is the same maker. The Waterford Stanley is the same. Also
same
makes
overall
the Agas.
company? Yeah.
The same.
They're out of Ireland, the Waterford Stanley.
Yeah.
So Stanley Waterford, but
is it?
Yeah. If you look it up, I think it's a Stanley Waterford. Right.
So, anyways, it's kind of fun to be cooking on something that's similar, except for this one's wood burning, whereas the other one was a propane stove.
Right. And it's a great stove, but I did learn something afterwards that I think is worth noting for those of you that are thinking of a stove and thinking of not just cooking on wood, but having that for a source of heat and for a kind of a prepping backup situation. That is the ability to heat water. A lot of wood cook stoves have reservoirs, have the ability to heat water. I thought this one would, and it does not. I have not been able to find any information on a water reservoir.
A reservoir.
And so while we think we're going to love this stove, I would recommend that for prepping reasons and just good sustainability energy use reasons. You know, if you're heating, it's great to have a water reservoir, and I would consider that if you're looking into a stove.
You know, if you're already heating with it, it doesn't take any extra fuel to heat the water, and so it just increases your efficiency, your energy efficiency.
It does, and so we will be looking into whether we can modify this one in the future or not, and custom make something. So, all righty. Question on a bowl. Ginter asks, I love your bowl with the green tomatoes. Is that vintage or a replica? Where did you find it? That's that big giant. I think it's like
the red and
huge.
White green. I can fit about 2 toddlers in it, I think. So I don't know how big it actually is in measurement, but it is a giant bowl. And it is a brand new bowl. So they are actually still making them. I don't know that you would even call that a replica, because it is a still made usable kitchen bowl. So I have no idea where to get them. I got them at a local Mennonite store that still stocks the full line of Grannyware or splatterware. So
cool.
I don't know where to tell you to get them though. Sorry.
All right, so Kathleen Johnson asks, another stove question, what are the advantages to cooking on the old stove, this being the wood burning stove, when you have a gas stove in your kitchen?
That is a really good question.
Yeah, and both of us can answer that. You go ahead and start.
Well, okay, so on a real just basic level in terms of your food, there's a lot of debate as to how this could possibly be, but the food does taste better. It absolutely tastes better.
The most important factor.
Why, but it tastes better. And it just makes you feel really like romantic when you're cooking on it.
Love it. Okay. So go out and buy a wood stove. Well, we need to heat our home, right? Yeah. And we primarily heat with wood. We do have a backup system, but we want to primarily heat with wood. We have wood as a resource. And we also want to be able to heat and cook if our electricity, gas, if there's a lack in all those services. So that wood cook stove serves both as a cooking unit and as a heating unit, and it is going to definitely be serving actively dual purpose in our house in the winter times.
Yeah, the back side of our house is away from our other wood heat source, so the kitchen side, so that can get really quite cool in the winter.
Or we have to spend more on another fuel, which for us is propane or diesel in our oil furnace, and so somewhere you've got to then duplicate that heat and get it into that side of the house by putting wood.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, by putting a wood cook stove in, we're then providing heat for that side of a house for a resource that we have readily accessible It's also there for a backup. So even if you don't want to use it to heat your house all the time or cook on all the time, it's a great backup. Say you don't have a fireplace or any wood stove. A wood burning cook stove is a great backup to be able to cook and heat your home if you have any kind of interruption in electricity, propane, whatever your heating and power sources are.
Yeah. It's also a really, okay, this sounds really strange to say, but a really warm way in terms of the atmosphere of the house, not the temperature, to have your home. Because if you had a gas stove, you would never just leave a kettle on to boil just in case you need it. You would probably, it would be a complete waste. You would probably not put your stew on or your roast on to boil on an open stove in a Dutch oven. That just, that would be a real waste if you're having to bring in that resource. But because you're already heating the house with it, you can do those things. It's just a byproduct. That hot surface is sitting there in order to be able to cook on, and you can set the kettle on there so you can always have a kettle ready to go. You can always have, something on that's cooking a long cook time. So there's actually a real nice warmth to it, especially in a winter time that is very welcoming. Just saying, there's always something ready. There's always something there available.
So essentially, the more you can accomplish with one source of energy, the better.
Yeah.
And when you add how great the food tastes on top of that,
and how romantic you feel.
And how romantic it is. It's amazing. Okay, alrighty, one more from this video from Kim Critchfield. I am new to fermenting. Can you give me some measurements or ratios on the Salsa Verde ferment?
Okay, Kim, was that Kim?
That was Kim, yes.
Kim is referring to, in that video, I show how I am fermenting the whole, I actually have a jar. It's really fun. We have not tasted it yet. I haven't tried it yet, but the ferment is coming along beautifully. But I'm fermenting whole tomatillos with a whole peeled lime, with cilantro, with garlic, all in the same jar. So essentially, it's a ready-made green tomatillo salsa verde, and all I'll have to do is fish out all the stuff out of the brine and blend it up in the blender, maybe add a little bit of onion or something that I have preserved in a different way in the house, and it'll be ready to go. So you are asking for some basic measurements for that. And let me just tell you that if you do not have this book, this is Traditionally Fermented Foods. I'll try to add a link in the description here for you. The basic recipe that I followed came from this book, and I have just loved this book. She's one of the few people who really talks about preserving food through fermenting, not just the quick ferments that you then stick in your refrigerator and have to eat fairly quickly, because they're taking up a lot of refrigerator space. So the recipe here calls for 1 1/4 pounds of tomatillos, 2 large garlic cloves, 1/3 cup of cilantro, and 1 lime peeled, and a hot pepper, 1 hot pepper. And you put that all in with a brine, and generally the brine is about 2.5 tablespoons of salt to 1 quart of water. And then you just follow basic fermenting instructions with that, making sure it's all weighted down, which is a little tricky to do when you have the cilantro in there. But here's a trick. Don't chop the cilantro, put it in whole stems and all, and that'll make it a lot easier because it's all gonna go in the blender eventually anyway, so those stems will just blend right up. So anyways, that is the basics for that recipe. Again, I really, really recommend this book. It's a really good one. Okay, so I see you are finding us a new video.
I am finding a new video. Yep.
All right.
Sorry, it's taking me a second.
This is the internet up here in the middle of nowhere is a little slow. So
satellite internet is
a little bit slow.
So you got to hold the floor for a minute.
Okay, so let's keep talking about fermenting things whole. Other things that I've tried whole, yeah.
Somebody in one of my scrolled through, but there weren't a lot of questions there, so I went on, was about doing it with chilies. So
doing what with chilies?
Asking about the fermenting with chilies.
Oh, because I do have a jar of fermented chilies up there. They're just whole chilies. They are fermenting peppers, chilies. I just mixed in everything that was kind of hot and spicy, and we needed to use up really quickly. I had already dehydrated what I wanted, and those are just gonna ferment right along. I want those really well fermented for a chili sauce. So I'll probably ferment those until sometime midwinter when I'm starting to get that itch to harvest something or to do something. And then I will go harvest my fermented tomato or peppers out of the jar and blend those right up in kind of just the same way. Just blend it right up in the blender or food processor and make a nice spicy fermented hot sauce out of them. All right,
cool.
It'd be good.
All right, so got a couple questions from the not sun-dried tomatoes video.
Okay.
Okay, and two of them. First one from Rhonda Welker. Thank you, Carolyn. The fresh tomatoes are beautiful. Do you remember what variety they are? And I'm picking this question because we often don't, I particularly often don't answer questions on varieties of tomatoes for a very specific reason.
Yes.
I get this all the time in emails and on posts. And what varieties do you want to grow? We want to grow that variety. And I think we can tell you what some of the varieties we're growing, but I want to bring out that it's really important not to listen to somebody online on YouTube and just pick those varieties because they're growing. You don't. The locations are different. There's your soil's different. There's all kinds of things that are different. And so, like for us, we grew some Jories this year that did really well.
We really like those. Those are an indeterminate paste type tomato. The Jories, the big ones.
Yes, they were. I was thinking, making sure they were
big old guys.
Yeah, very meaty. Produced very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some Romas.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
An aroma type called Saucy, and that did really well.
Yeah, those did really well.
We tried a few other ones that didn't work out real great for us this
year.
But
you particularly like a meaty tomato for canning, for salsas that has a lot of meat, less liquid in it, and so those Roma style work really well. Yeah. But we want to encourage you guys to find out what your neighbors are doing, to find out what the varieties that people are using in your area, if you're needing to find out what's going to work well for you, not from somebody online. So,
yeah, absolutely. Those tomatoes, I believe, were the Jories that were in the video.
Okay. Other question here from Flora Fonifol. I hope I got that right, Flora. Can you do this with green tomatoes? That is the dried tomatoes.
Yes.
So
absolutely, you could do that and it'd be delicious.
Do anything differently there?
I might use a different seasoning mix. In that video, I talked about how you could use different seasoning mixes. I was using just a basic Italian mix. I think, usually when we're using, in our household, when we're using green tomatoes, usually it's going to go towards a Mexican flavor meal. And so I would probably use a little more chili powder, red chili flakes, maybe some cumin, something like that instead. Oregano is always good. So maybe a little bit different on the seasoning, but you can absolutely do that with the green tomatoes.
Okay.
And then turn them into a salsa verde in the middle of winter if you want. Works for that too.
All right. So we're going to move on to the how to hire a butcher video and have your meat packaged. And I'm going to give you one to talk over for a minute because I don't think there's just a straight answer. But from Faith Buller, Faith Buller, I like that you are addressing using the whole animal, and that is very important to us. Do you have recipes for using what you refer to as the ugly?
The ugly.
And so I don't know that you have specific recipes that you're going to give.
Did we call it the ugly or did we call it the awful?
Somebody in here definitely called it the awful, meaning awful.
Awful, yeah.
Ugly, awful, awful. But maybe you can
Same
talk
difference.
for a few minutes about how we use some of those different things.
Right.
Yeah.
So honestly, that's been a journey for us, and we would like to be using everything. Or close to everything, and in one way or another we do, because we do compost some of the things, but there's only so much that the family actually likes to eat. Now we're talking everything, not just chickens in this, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's, this was just about butchering in general.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And about working with a butcher and getting those different parts and pieces, which can be challenging from some butchers.
So here are a few things that I've really learned about eating the offal is that the fresher you eat it, the better the flavor is going to be. It's not going to be nearly as strong if you eat it within a day or two of butcher fresh and it's not been frozen, as if you put it in the freezer for 6 months and then, when you're really having to clean out the freezer, you go back and eat it then. Another thing to remember when you're using it is to slice it really thin if your family's not used to it. Now, the heart, remember, is a muscle. And so to me and to our family, we really feel like the heart tastes a lot more like maybe a flavorful steak than it does something more similar to liver or something with that stronger organ flavor. So, you know, that's just a start. Now, some people grind up pieces like the liver and put it into their ground meat or their sausages. We don't tend to do that, but we do try to use the liver. Now, I'm not always successful, but one thing that we really like to do with the liver, somebody mentioned doing it with the lungs, is to slice it, dehydrate it, and it makes an amazing dog treat. The dogs just love them, and it's really good for them. Now, there are other things you can do with them. You can take the liver and chop it into really small little bits, and people put it right in their smoothies because after it's been frozen for 14 days, it should deal with any, I don't know, pest issues or anything like that could be in the liver. And then a lot of people feel like it's incredibly healthy for you to have it raw.
It's supposed to be.
It is, and we've done that a few times. I don't know that I could say that I just felt like a big burst of energy from having that. Some people just, I mean, you would think that it was, I don't know, what is it? Spam?
You know,
I don't know, what's the canned spam? What is that saying?
Right.
Like,
I don't know.
It is not canned spam. But yeah, so, you know, just for us, it's kind of a challenge to ourselves to keep using more and more of every animal and not let anything go to waste. And certainly not just throw something away. That just,
Yeah,
I don't know.
absolutely. Try not to.
That's awful if you're just killing an animal and throwing parts away. So anyways, I hope that answered the question.
Somebody, and I can't find this one particularly, but asked about what to do with the tongue, how to handle the tongue.
Oh, eat it.
Lingua
it's really
tacos.
Good.
Just tongue tacos.
Usually what you do is you would simmer that for a little bit of time in a seasoned water. So I usually put in like peppercorns, a little bit of clove, maybe some allspice, some bay leaves, lots of bay leaves. This makes it so good. Simmer it down for, 45 minutes. Take it out, let it cool, and then you have to peel the outer layer off of it, which gets a little rubbery. And at that point, it's like the most delicious shredded beef under there ever.
It really isn't,
it's
but
really
I would recommend having it as either a shredded item in something or small cubed. A lot of people do have a problem with the texture. And there are recipes out there for having it kind of like a steak, and that can be for some people that are texture sensitive. And honestly, I don't care for the steaks that much that way. That's not always a great introduction. So doing it like a shredded or a cubed is definitely a better way to go, I think.
Yeah.
And just different people I've talked to.
It is really, really good flavored though, I think. I really like it.
Wonderful flavored.
I'll be honest, the first time I had to deal with a tongue, I was like 3 months pregnant, and the butcher handed me this thing, and it went in my sink, and I was supposed to scrub that, and this was a lot of years ago, and I think that sat there until Josh came home and removed the offending item from my kitchen sink.
You've done so great though. Now like it's nothing.
Yeah, now I'm good with it.
And they're great, and it's not very often in our house that we get to have lingua tacos. We only have so many tongues.
So, there is
I always look forward to that.
Yeah, okay. I'll not break off into a whole nutrition lesson about the proper percentages of what type of food actually comes off of an animal, but there's a little thing for you to think about.
All right. Jennifer Sinclair asks, this is a little sideways, but it's probably good because I'm sure people have this question, and people are in the season of starting to render fats. When you render your fats, do you leave the ring on the jar when you store?
I could go either way on that. In terms of the safety of it, honestly, rendered fats in a jar are not government considered safe for the reason that they don't recognize that as actually a canned item. They recognize you as just sealing the item in a jar, and so therefore it's storage. It's not canning. You're dealing with solid fat. So as long as you're sure that all your liquid is boiled out, you don't really have a botulism concern because the bacteria can't live in a solid fat like that. So, either way, I think on that is absolutely fine.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. All right. This is one we get questions about quite a bit, dealing with pressure canning, and I know it's in this section, but I think it's a good question to just help bring some clarity to that I'm pretty sure you can answer, by Pamela Claire.
Okay.
I just learned after 2 years of canning that one should not water bath or pressure can on a glass cooktop. Sadly, our entire neighborhood is an all-electric neighborhood, and I know a lot of people that have that problem.
That issue, yeah.
And you've got to get some backup sources for several things if you're in that situation. And they don't have any gas either. I'm not ready to buy a different stove, and so I know, Carolyn, that you use a stove outdoors. We do. That is the Camp Chef, which is a great outdoor stove for canning. Now, she says she's reading that certain pressure canners shouldn't be used on certain types of outdoor stoves. At this point, I'm completely confused about how I can switch to pressure canning on an outdoor stove. Do you have any insights on this?
Yeah, there's actually a few things there, which is that you cannot make the blanket statement that you cannot pressure can on a glass cook stove, because some of the newer glass cook stoves are actually okay for pressure canning. So, you know, you really need to get out your stove manual or find a version online and see. Usually they're very specific about that. Some of them, the actual bigger problem is with the water bath canners, because those are not usually flat on the bottom, and so they create this odd suction with the high heat, and they'll actually break the glass top of your stove because of the suction, not because of the heat. So you really need to look at it. I know some of the issues are, of course, weight, and pressure canners can be very, very heavy. So so I would encourage you to first go look and just double check your manual and make sure that's true of your stove. Now, the issue with pressure canning on outdoor propane stoves, the camp stoves, have to do with how hot those things get.
BTUs.
They get really, really hot. And so, you know, there is some question about how hot is too hot and which stoves go to that. And usually stoves list their maximum BTUs, what it'll burn up to. But you don't need to go crank your stove up to high in order to can.
Well, if you're managing your canner correctly, that doesn't really matter, does it? If you're following rules, canning rules, and managing it correctly, it doesn't matter if the BTUs can go too high. You're going to find out where you need to be.
So that's my point in that, is that if you're watching your canner and you're sure you're not over pressurizing the whole thing, you should be just fine. So I would go with that. You know, honestly, the bigger issue with pressure canning on a camp stove is getting a camp stove that can handle the weight, because some of them are pretty cheesy out there.
You don't want the old Coleman little box.
No, you want something that is heavy duty.
Right, and so the Camp Chef is really, really good. That's performed for us for years. And if you're in an all-electrical neighborhood, I'd just go get one and a couple propane tanks, if nothing else, for backup. Even if you find out you can do the can on your electric stove, have one for backup. Anyways,
it's a good idea.
Yeah, just a backup cooking source, at least outdoors. So that's great, and is another level of preparedness.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, one more here from this video. Susan B, do you have any issues with a big freezer that you packed up with meat where the center of the meat didn't freeze fast enough and turned bad?
Ooh.
You can have that experience.
Yeah.
We have not had that experience, but it does happen, and you do not want to overpack a large freezer with non-frozen meat. So there are several strategies. Hopefully, if you're bringing cut and wrap meat home from the butcher, it is frozen or near frozen, and that's not a problem.
Yeah.
I can bring, like this year, we are having a beef cut up, wrapped. It will be frozen when I pick it up. You can put it all in the freezer, no problem. But like the chickens that we were doing a few weeks ago, where we did have several hundred chickens, a couple hundred to put in to a large freezer, there's several things you want to do. You want to chill them in 40-degree water. That brings the temperature down. And so if you saw that video, they went into a large chill tank, cold water. That brings their temperature down. That helps. Even with that, you do not want to just stock up a large freezer.
Right.
You have to do one of two things. Now, we have several freezers, and so we spread them out between several freezers because they were all low at that time of the year, and let them freeze between several freezers, then stock them all in one freezer. The other thing that you could do that somebody mentioned, I think, in here on the comments, is to rotate them around and move them around. That's pretty
Till they're
hard.
all frozen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't. That's pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
And you really got to stay on it, but you can do that. So that is an excellent, excellent question, and you do need to be careful with that. You do not want to just go pack a large chest freezer full of raw meat. You're gonna have problems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good. Okay. I think we are going to move on to one more video. We're
All
getting
right.
down there on time. And last week's video that I did filling in for you, are you prepared?
Isn't he nice? He
Are
filled in
you
for me.
prepared?
I think we're going to call that Barn Chats with Josh.
Barn Chat. I'll miss
That was
you.
good. Well, you had the
That was
cat.
fun,
You didn't need me.
Anybody need a barn cat? We have some really good barn
We
cats.
have really good barn cats.
We just few too many right now.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
need to offload a few
Yeah.
barn cats.
Yeah,
If you're local and you need a barn cat,
let us know.
send us a message.
Okay. Talking about being prepared, Deanna Marie, how do you stock up on fruit and veggies? They go bad. Well, we definitely
I'm sorry, how do they go bad?
we
Okay.
definitely want to prevent them from going bad. So,
How do we stock up
so
on
some
fruits
strategies
and
for
veggies?
preserving fruit and veggies while I find the next question.
Okay, so we preserve them. That's how we stock up on fruits and veggies. Some vegetables and some fruits can preserve themselves, like in a root cellar or in common storage is the other term. Sometimes you have things, sometimes you have things that can just sit on the counter rather than being, actually preserved in a cool root cellar. So that's the term common storage there. And things that you can bring in and really stock up on are in the fruits. It's things like apples, some of the hard keeper pears. Those are really the best for bringing in that just store themselves. If I want to bring in any other fruits besides those, then they just have to be preserved. They have to be either dehydrated, canned, occasionally fermented, but that's a quick ferment for, keeping in the fridge. And of course you can ferment them into alcohol. So, that's kind of your preservation methods for your fruit. If you're bringing in vegetables, you actually have a lot of vegetables that can store themselves. Cabbage will store for quite a while in a cool, damp environment. So you can bring in quite a few. We've had years where we've brought it in cases of cabbage when we haven't had gardens or hadn't had large gardens and we still wanted some food storage, and just kept them kind of in a cool, damp place. The root crops generally will store really well in cool, damp. They'll store medium well in just kind of your kitchen environment. So those are the types of things that we would bring in and stock up on. If we want to bring in anything else, we have to be able to preserve them and get them in preserved food. So fermenting, canning, dehydrating. You can freeze them, of course. People freeze a lot of veggies. So.
Okay. There's not a whole ton of questions on here. It's a lot of good comments and ideas that people are throwing around. But one that I got a couple times was why I didn't mention guns and ammo as an essential. And I guess we could put it in there as an essential. And but guns and ammo are not your first line of defense in dealing with a grid down situation. Yeah, there's different realities that you're going to face. And we are pro-gun and for hunting, and hunting as a skill is great, and we sure want that where we're at, and if you live in an environment. And we do encourage having guns for self-protection, but there are a lot of other important things first. So while that does fill in the list, and maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more in the preparedness video, it's not the top of the list. If you're in an emergency situation, there are certain elements that come to the top of the list, and that has to do with shelter, with water, with food, with heat, with medical supplies, with communication abilities.
Right.
And those things are the top of the list to take care of yourself.
Right.
And guns and ammo come down there. You're just not gonna fight off a horde if you've got
And you're not going to have to if you're starving yourself.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
if you have nothing.
Right. So,
but I think I didn't watch your video actually because I haven't had the time to watch your video. Sorry.
Come on, get out. Come on.
I've been too busy preparing
Good.
to watch
That's
your preparing
great.
video.
Good.
But I think you probably talked a lot about that. Being prepared is just a way of life. It's not necessarily for some major catastrophic event, although those happen, and we've seen those happen in our country in the last,
I did.
decade.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I talked about the beans, bullets, and Band-Aid syndrome that we do not subscribe to.
Yeah.
And somebody even I was reading through here commented they had never heard that before. And what that means is there is a certain mentality that just says if I just go buy and stock up on these things and have guns and ammo in the shelf, and I have my dried food on the shelf somewhere, and I've got dried food, water stored somewhere, and I've got seeds somewhere, and maybe even I've got a piece of property with all that stuff somewhere that I visit once a year and I'm going to go to when it all goes bad. That's the beans, bullets, and Band-Aids approach to life, and that is a huge mistake if you were making that mistake. If that's the type of prepping that you think is the way to go, you're not developing any skill growing seeds, preserving food. You're not developing any skills with heating with wood or grid down situations.
Yeah.
You're not developing any skills with guns and ammo. Why are you going to have guns and ammo? It's either to hunt and provide food or protect yourself. If you're not getting trained in those things, you're going to have problems no matter how many guns and ammo you have.
Yeah.
And so we want to live prepared.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so there's nothing wrong with having beans, bullets, and
Did I get on the pedestal a little bit?
Yeah, a little
I think
bit.
I did.
That's okay.
But
I got my soapboxes.
It's an important topic. It's an important topic.
It is important. It really is, and we run into that quite a bit. And I think for us, we have worked so hard that we realize how much skill is involved in actually learning how to garden in a way that's going to provide for our family. So thinking that a stock of seeds in the basement is going to, all of a sudden, you're going to have this gorgeous garden the next year that's going to feed your whole family, I think to us feels very misguided and dangerous.
It is misguided
because
and
people feel
dangerous.
secure with that in a place that they really shouldn't.
Right. You got to be
very
developing the skills to use all of those things.
Right.
Yeah. So don't be prepared, live prepared.
Yeah.
I think that's
There
a good motto.
Yeah. You still stock up on all the stuff. Just know how
Absolutely.
to actually use it.
Well, and practice, live it
Practice,
daily.
yeah. Good.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, we're about there on time anyways,
Okay.
and that is a great segue into the next Pantry Chat.
Yes,
which you already mentioned, which
right.
is getting your homestead prepared for the winter and beyond, because a lot of the being prepared for a season or whatever is covering other things that we all think about and talk about that could come our way.
Sounds good.
That's it. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us today, and we will see you soon. Goodbye.
Bye.